And if you serve a God who absolutely would not call and sanction you, right, to destroy something else that seeks your destruction, you got the wrong God. You got the wrong God. If your God wouldn't sanction your salvation at the expense of someone else, you have the wrong God. And Nat Turner was saying, no problem. You want to use the word God? We can. But the characteristics we're going to use, right, come from the one I know.
Welcome, comrades, to another episode of Not All Hood. So I'm just going to go ahead and call Dr. Daniel Black Not All Hood's resident guest. He's both a host and fan favorite. As a veteran professor of African American Studies at Clark Atlanta University for the last 30 years, Dr. Black has had a profound impact shaping the minds of thousands of young black men and women. A brilliant mind himself, Dr. Black is a multi-award-winning author whose latest offering, Isaac's Song, has also been met with rave reviews. On this episode, we discuss spirituality, religion, the significance of church in the black community, and the possibility that Harriet Tubman may have also had the ability to walk on water. This is an episode I guarantee you're going to enjoy. I want to start. Can I start with the first question?
Oh, Lord. Here we go.
It just came to me.
Okay. I'm a little scared, but go ahead.
If I know God, do I need Jesus?
I think that question is relevant only if we're talking about Christianity, right? And the question is, if I know God, do I need anybody? And I think the answer is yes, because I think even knowing God, we need each other. Because there are some things, I won't say God can't do, but there's clearly some things God won't do, right? If I need $20, God won't give it to me, but you might, you know. If I need somebody to walk with me as I'm grieving the passing of my mother, sometimes a human hand, sometimes flesh does a nurturing work, different than spirit. So I think the reason we need each other is because I think all of us combined is God. I think God is a notion in our heads, but I think the reality of what God is us together collectively.
Now that collectiveness that you're talking about, when we talk about it in the sense of a church that we know it, that collectiveness today looks very different too when we talk about what a church is and the notion of a church and its purpose. Because historically, I think it's clear what the purpose of a church was. It was clearer when we look historically, but today it's just not as clear at all. Not to me, and I think not to a lot of people, which is why a lot of people have problems finding where do they fit in to churches. We know it as this physical place that we go to commune, and we all follow these rules. But you can also be like Malcolm, and he was talking to me earlier today about just being with his family and having a sense of who you are because of your spirituality, acknowledging that, being outside in nature and being closer to whoever the God is that you have,
right,
being closer to that.
And I think that's certainly a kind of church. Absolutely. And I don't know that we need a building at all. I just think that's the tradition, right? I'm not, I think nature really is the building, right? I think if you're going to meet God, I think all you really have to do is go outside, right? And I think also that when you're talking about community, family and community are not identical, right? Family is a group of people, right, who sometimes is biological, it doesn't always have to be, but who live under the same roof, right, and live a kind of collective experience together. Community, right, is groups of those things, right, who serve a different purpose than just in one's house. Like, you can raise the best children on the planet, but they can't marry each other.
Right.
So see, there's something else you need. There's something else a family needs. And families need community, not just persons, but families need community. And we need community because also there are gifts represented in your house, but that's not every gift, right? So there are some gifts that your household does not have, but the people in your house need it. And the people down the street, they need the gifts in your house. right? It's very much like the way, again, the world is created. I think of foods. I think of healthy foods like broccoli is really, really healthy. And
Right.
you know, it's wonderful, but it's not the only food you can eat,
Right.
right? And even if you eat it all the time, you wouldn't be healthy,
Hmm.
although it is healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? You need other things. You need, and the way the body is composed is you need broccoli, yes, but you need beans too, you know, yes, and you need lentils too, and you need protein to see.
All the parts.
That's right. You have to have all the parts, but no one person and no one family has all the parts. Only in community do you get all the parts.
Hmm.
Mm.
I think that many people looking back, especially in my age group, who have grown up in the church,
Mhm.
and like you too, I'm not sure if this would be the case, but reading the chapter and, Black on Black on Black, I think it makes sense that when I look back at my history in the church, that's exactly what I found. It was more people who were like me and my family, but in different ways,
Sure.
and learning from different people,
Sure.
and kind of getting a template of who we are supposed to be as young Black people and even older Black people in the world. It was a training ground almost. Yes, you had church and you had the religion and you had the Bible and you had service, but you also got trained in so many things. And those
Absolutely.
extras that I think you're
Absolutely.
talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And the black church had a lot of issues then and now. But what the black church also had was some things that were salvific for Black people, right? Some things that really saved Black people, I believe, right? And some of that is that training ground,
Right.
right? Like you can't find a better place than what the black church had in terms of teaching Black children how to do public speaking.
Easter Sunday.
You can't find it.
You can't find
You
it.
can't find it.
And
it trained them up from 5 years old, whether you thought you wanted it or not.
Yeah, you couldn't say no.
That's right.
And when you got up there, it didn't matter what you got up there. That was the key. And you were going to do well.
You got up there.
And if you couldn't be heard, you're going to hear from
You're
somebody.
going to start that speech again.
You're gonna that's okay, baby.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Oh, that's okay. You were good. You could be terrible. You were good.
That's right.
Because you're going to be good the next day,
That's
too.
right.
You're
and the
right.
older you got, the longer the speech.
That's right. That's right.
But
Yes.
it was teaching something. It wasn't just because it was each Easter. It was really teaching Black children, you've got to know how to speak truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know how to be able to open your mouth and be unashamed and speak the truth in the world in which we live. If not, this place will absolutely silence you and kill you.
Yeah.
The Black church absolutely taught that. It taught many other things too that many times we don't even think about. Even things like, I remember as a child, my grandmother would give me a quarter. And she'd say, now you put this in Sunday school. She would give me 50 cents to get a drink, right? Mm-hmm. We had a soda machine that where you could put the coins in and pull the soda out.
Yeah.
Right? This is the 70s, right? But what she made clear was, this quarter is for the offering.
Right.
This 50 cents is for you to get you a soda pop, whatever, right? In other words, what she was saying is, do not go to an institution and it lend its strength unto fortifying you and you don't support it.
Right.
That's a powerful, powerful lesson in reciprocity, in institutional reciprocity. If you go to a place and it feeds you, you give back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's extremely important for any child to learn anywhere. It taught things that the Black church taught things like, there's a difference between an elder and your peers. You don't talk to your elders like you talk to your peers. There are things you share with your peers, right? There are ways you approach an elder. There's a way you say good afternoon to an elder. I think that was absolutely positively beautiful and crucial.
Yeah.
And I think the absence of it is very, very problematic for me. As a university professor, I've been at Clark for 30 years. And there are ways, unknowingly and in their kindness, there are ways that students will sometimes speak or use language and I'm clear they didn't grow up in the church.
Mm.
You didn't get the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Do those values still exist today in the church?
I think in some churches. I think one of the ways that I don't want to say messed up, maybe I'll say got off track was, I think in many instances now, people are going to the church they prefer. Right? I think that's how we get the mega church movement. Right. Instead of, at one point, you went to the church that was in your neighborhood.
Right.
Right. Your community church. That was the church mama grew up in. That was the church dad, and that's important because the generations were in that church.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. See, now you can have church where 70% of your audience is 40 years old,
That's true.
right? And you can have church where the adults and the children don't know each other, don't speak to each other.
True.
Yeah.
Or you could have that church where you have mostly older women who are in the church and they're 70 to 90.
That's right.
You know,
That's
you-
absolutely
and,
right.
But and there used to be a youth choir everywhere.
That's right.
To get a youth choir today,
It's gonna be rough.
very, very, very
It's
different.
gonna be hard.
Very
That's-
hard.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things I learned too, was the whole aspect of the music. And my choir director, he would go down to, I think, Virginia, and they would have conferences on directing and learn new music
Absolutely.
and bring it back. And then we
Absolutely.
get in our robes and then we do the step in and we,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Oh,
we
I
just-
loved it. I
oh
loved it.
my goodness.
And
it
you
was a
didn't
whole
have
thing.
to. You didn't have to be in the choir as a youth, but you had to do something.
You had to do something.
That's the thing I thought was profound. You could usher.
Yes.
You could be a junior deacon.
Junior deacon.
Right? You could be the secretary of Sunday school. You could sing in the choir, but you had to do something. But again, people are sleeping on the power of that. Because what they're saying is, if you're in a community, carry it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just be dead weight in a community. Don't be in the community, right? But you're not upholding it. Then you're a liability. If you're going to be in it, contribute unto it. I think that is absolutely a powerful, powerful notion. Don't just be entertained by a thing.
Right, right. Be a part of it.
Because that's your buy-in. That would be part of the reason you fight to make this thing work. You fight to make it better, as opposed to as soon as you get mad, as soon as there's something you don't like, you just leave it.
Yeah, and that's what people do.
Absolutely. But it trains us to do that in everything.
True. True.
So as soon as you don't have a teacher at college you don't like, or as soon as you have a teacher who, oh my God, I have a hard time understanding them, you drop out of school. As soon as you're in a relationship and you and your wife disagree, or your wife tells you a truth that you don't like, you start considering divorce. It's the same thing. In other words, anytime a person or an institution cannot make my soul glad, I'm ready to leave it.
And the church gives you that training of go ahead and stay. Because there's as you said, there's going to be problems in the church. But I think you're also saying there's going to be problems in every institution that you're going to be in.
And everywhere. Everywhere.
Mhm.
So if one is trying to figure out, can I find a place where I'm always happy? You won't even find that within yourself. So that's a bad precedent to set up. A person's got to know how to sit and think and say, you know what? This is raggedy, but I'm going to help this be better. That's different than this is raggedy and I'm out. Then you spend a life searching and wandering. Just everything is an immediate thrill. Because what I'm looking for is what will please me right now. So that everything I invest in is something from which I can get an immediate return. But that's a dangerous thing when you're trying to build a nation or you're trying to build a person. It's important to tell a child that you will have days of sadness. I won't try to fix it for you. There will be nothing you can do about it, right? But on those days of sadness, what you must do is figure out how can you make a little joy.
But it seems like church or religion teaches you if you are not in a good place, then you turn to God because he's going to make it better.
And I do think some religions teach that. I think that's true. And I think the stereotype is this notion that, oh, if a person goes to church, then what you believe in is this God as a magician, that you just call on God and God fixes all reality, right? But that's not really the tenet of any faith. The tenet of no faith says that if you believe in God, if you really believe in God, you can have joy every day. There's no faith that teaches that. In fact, you don't need faith if that's true. The whole point of faith is when things aren't going well, when you cannot hear from God, right? When seemingly the variables don't add up, can you still believe? That's really what faith is about.
Yeah.
Hey, comrades, if you are enjoying the episode, join the conversation. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Don't get yourself blocked. Keep it clean.
I define faith as believing in something despite all the evidence that's before you. It might be one thing and present itself to you, and it might be bad. but as you said, doing something to move beyond it, understand it. But you have to do it yourself too. You know, the work. And I guess to what you were saying, hey, let me just turn to God. I've always seen it as he's counting on me to do something in order to move the needle to that next song, if you will.
Yeah.
So the work that I have to put into it is what I know has to be a part of the whole process. I just see so many people not interested in church because of what it teaches, or things that we see on TikTok or social media. There are enough people who are turning away for it to be a movement, really. But
Yes,
then
it's
with
true.
the same token, I know that there are so many people between the ages of 20 and 40 specifically who are loving church and with pastors who are speaking to them in the language that they speak.
It's true. It's true. And there are lots of movements
Yeah,
around
there
now.
are.
Yeah. And I don't know that I necessarily think that's a bad thing. But in my humble opinion, I think sometimes we miss a little bit of the mark, because I think that the real power lies in teaching people that ultimately the goal of walking with God is to become like God. Right. I think that's the ultimate goal of walking with God.
So what's the difference between, because I hear that, but I always hear you want to walk with Jesus, you want to live Christ-like. So it's, the messages can be confusing, because it's like, okay, am I trying to walk with God or am I trying to walk with Jesus?
Well, see, most Christians believe that's one and the same. That Jesus is God.
But I thought Jesus was God's son.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And enough like God that Jesus's example is divine, right? So the notion of Jesus as God's son. Now, for me, I don't believe Jesus was God. I believe Jesus was a divine brother. I believe that. And I believe Jesus walked upright. I believe in the character of Christ. I don't believe in the religiosity of Christ, right? Okay. And I believe ultimately that we would get far more if we study Jesus's character more than this. See, if we take this whole notion that Jesus is the Son of God, then Jesus arrives holy. And there's no achievement in Jesus's being. The achievement in Jesus' being for me is if Jesus is born regular and ascends to divinity. Because then I can do that. I can do that.
Because you were born regular.
Absolutely.
You were born regular.
Absolutely.
Right.
But I can ascend to divinity too. But if Jesus is God, then Jesus is the wrong example for me. Right? Unless I'm God too. See, it can go either way for me. But I think the greater, I think the greater fruit one could get is the notion of let me see if I can manifest the kind of character that Jesus did. But I think even when we talk about the miracles of Christ and all of that, right? That for me is possible too. Because yes, I believe Jesus could walk on water. But I also believe Harriet Tubman could.
Oh, wow. I mean, I love that, but
work that out.
I mean, please, because I love that. But yeah, can you unpack that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about one believing beyond one's announced limitations. And I think I'm just grabbing Harriet because I believe she's a great example of this. Harriet Tubman had announced limitations. First of all, Harriet Tubman was enslaved.
Right.
Speaking of limitation.
Hello.
Right. Also, Harriet Tubman was seizuric. She had seizures badly. She had this. She had these seizures because a slave mistress hit her in the head. I think we know this, right? And at any arbitrary time, she would literally black out. Right. She of course, when nobody was giving any medicine for the, she was an enslaved person, and she knew she was seizuric, of course, right? And of course, she's running from the South north, taking slaves back and forth. One of the things I was telling my class the other day is, first of all, why couldn't they catch her?
Someone, especially in that physical condition.
And she ain't got nothing. You a slave running. Folks got guns, folks got horses. Why couldn't y'all catch her? It's not just that she ran. And she kept doing it. Back and forth. Why couldn't y'all catch her? The answer lies in what Harriet Tubman knew. It doesn't lie in what white folks were unable to do. Because see, again, if she was seizuric, she had these blackouts. There had to be a time when she was running through those woods and fell out. Had to be. If you're right?
Sure. It makes sense.
Just in terms, if you just deducing, just what's the likelihood?
Okay.
Right. It had to be. So even when she fell out, that would have been the time to catch her. There's something she knew. But what I think Harriet Tubman knew God. But what that translates into is, I think Harriet Tubman knew how to talk to the trees. I think Harriet Tubman knew how to talk to the rivers. And I think the trees, the river, the leaves, the air, I think they covered for her as she was moving. I mean that literally.
Well, that goes back, and that goes back to the whole nature.
Absolutely.
That we were talking about.
Absolutely.
That premise.
I absolutely positively believe that. I absolutely positively believe that. And because she knew and had this relationship with nature, right? Every time she moved, she alerted nature, and nature helped her. In fact, the most recent movie about Harriet shows this, right? It demonstrates this in no uncertain terms. If we have the space as Black people to believe that. See, if we're not careful, we believe in Christian things. We believe in biblical things. But the biblical also has what we might call the mythological.
It does.
Jesus turned water to wine.
That's right.
Well, Jesus turned water to wine, which I can roll with, right? Harriet can talk to the trees. Same category.
So now it makes sense. I remember when I was a kid, there was a movie, a woman called Jesus.
Moses.
Oh, okay.
Moses. That's right.
Shoot that down.
A woman called Moses.
Yes. Right.
Right. Okay, well. Okay, forget that. But
same book.
Yeah.
But the concept of I guess that's why I thought of Jesus, because the concept of what you're saying, I see that connection in the if we're talking about the mythological sense of the story of Jesus,
right?
But in a very real, practical sense, you go, well, how else do you explain Harriet not getting caught? Like, because everything you're saying, it makes I don't know how else you would explain it. I mean, it'd be a hell of a coincidence.
On so many levels.
That'd be a hell of a coincidence. A hell of a coincidence. And as Black people, not only is that story wonderful, it's not all that rare. Black people have been doing the magical since we arrived in this place. Right? What our ancestors were telling us is, you got to know God to pull this off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you say magical, you mean it in a sense of
the unexplainable,
the explainable,
that which seems not to make sense.
Right.
That which seems to have no
would
precedent.
fill in that blank.
That's right. But again, our elders have been telling us, right? Baby, if you don't do nothing else,
you better pray.
You better
believe in God.
But they were saying there is a connection between that relationship with the invisible and what you're able to do in the visible.
Mm-hmm.
They were telling us this. They couldn't say it academically, right? My grandmother would say, honey, I don't care what you do, but keep Jesus next to you.
That's right.
Right. And of course, in my head, on one hand, I'm thinking, oh, she's talking about Jesus in this book, in the religion. Well, not exactly, she wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was the framework, right? That was, if you will, the mask, if you will. But what she was really saying is, whatsoever you do, make sure that you move in this world with a relationship to the unseen and the unknown.
I was in the car with my grandmother once. We were going fast somewhere. Her feet were off the ground like this as if she was flying. She just felt like, I feel like I'm suspended in air. You are going very fast. I said, well, Grandma, why don't you put on your seatbelt at least? Because we're late and I am going fast. She wouldn't say anything. Please put on your seatbelt. Jesus is my seatbelt. I said, okay. That was her faith.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't have anything for that. So Jesus was her seatbelt and she was just fine. Sure. She was one of those people that you are describing.
Sure. And see, academically, we can explain the quote unquote silliness of that statement.
Yes.
Academically, we can.
Yeah.
What we cannot do academically is to explain how our elders who worked for 40 years for a person who despised them and called them boy or called them girl, right, or gal. What we cannot explain is how that person, right, still came home and loved children and sent them to college. Now that's the part we cannot explain.
Oh, you got that right. You can't explain.
Because what most of us say now is, if that had happened to me,
Oh, that's
see,
what
all of a sudden I'll be whooping it, I'll be like, right, which means then our elders were doing something that, outside of what we have the capacity to do, or what we think we have the capacity to do. But what they were saying, of course you have the capacity to do it, but what you cannot do is think you have the capacity in and of yourself. You've got to tap into something greater than you.
Right.
You got to tap into something unknown. And you won't necessarily be able to explain it, but it will still be true.
And that's something that seems to transcend Christianity.
Absolutely, which is why I keep saying, well, that Christian, right? Because it absolutely transcends Christianity. And this some African people have known and been doing far before we ever encountered Christianity. You know, we came to this country with God. Actually, we came to this country with the Creator. Once we met God, right?
Wow.
We translated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
God is a figure.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a character in a book called the Bible. And I ain't mad about it. But God has some limitations. The Creator is unlimited.
Wow. That
Say that again.
completely resonates.
Yeah. The Creator
Yes.
is that energy, that power which births and creates all things. God, as most people know it, right, is the leading figure in the Bible.
But I love that we came with the Creator, but we met God when we got here. And that's why I was saying before. But my daughter, she calls on the beloved Creator. Like,
that works for me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There was something I was watching on YouTube. It was about religion and God, and she actually asked me, "What is God?" And I told her, I said, "Well, that's some people call the beloved Creator God, but her relationship is and who she calls upon is the beloved Creator."
That makes sense to me.
So I love that. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to attribute it to Dr. Black. It's going to be one of my other Dr.
The
Black
Book of
favorite
Daniel.
quotes. Right? We came here with the Creator, but we met God when we got here.
Okay, but this whole thought of, like you said, being working as enslaved persons for all of those years, and still having that Christianity and that faith, there were those, was it Nat Turner, right, who didn't he use the Bible to say, this is what we're going to do in order to revolt? He was able to use the Bible. So in other words, people were looking at religion in a different way, not just for to be peaceful, as many were, but also to revolt.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, the problem with Nat Turner, with Denmark VC, with Gabriel Prosser, with Toussaint Louverture,
Yes,
is that when white folks handed Black people this text called the Bible, they thought they were handing the text to a slate that knew nothing of divinity and knew nothing of a spiritual realm. What Nat Turner did was to be able to say, oh, that part works with the God I know. In fact, Nat Turner said, God told me to kill y'all.
right.
In the name of Jesus, right? So let me gather up these people in the name of Jesus and do the work of God, right? See, that works for me. That makes sense to me. That absolutely makes sense to me. Why? Because you're destroying my people. Your foot is on the neck of my people. And if you serve a God who absolutely would not call and sanction you, right, to destroy something else that seeks your destruction, you got the wrong God. You got the wrong God. If your God wouldn't sanction your salvation at the expense of someone else, you have the wrong God. And Nat Turner was saying, no problem. You want to use the word God? We can. But the characteristics we're going to use, right, come from the one I know. Which is why really Black people are doing African spirituality in the church. That most Black people don't know it. This is really also the reason most Black people and white people have not been able, even to this day, to meld churches the way we've done schools. We can't go to church together because Black people are really doing ritual. White people are doing service. Right?
We're doing call and response.
We're doing ritual. And that's why also you can't put a time limit on the notion of when Black people are going to begin church or leave it.
Got you.
Because we're doing ritual.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Though.
Yes. See, if we're doing
And
service,
ritual
I
is
can
not
take
on a schedule.
makes
Written-
Services are.
because when you enter God's time is not clock time. God's time is not Kairos time. God's time is when the aim has been completed. That could be 30 minutes, it could be 2 hours, whatever, right? Because God can move time backwards or forward. So that, we could get out of church at 12:30, we could get out at 1:15, we could, whatever.
And if you're Pentecostal, you just stay over.
And we justify it.
From Tuesday to Sunday.
Yeah. But if the spirit is high, quote unquote, right? Which means if the exchange between human and spirit has done the work of transformation, the timing was fine. Because who wouldn't take transformation over 30 more minutes?
You got that right. What? Yeah.
But if we start at 12 and church is going to end at 12:45, like in some other folks' churches, right? The notion that we were here for a good hour or a good 45 minutes, but my soul was not transformed is unsatisfying.
You're just doing service.
Yes. And some people like that because they're honoring the clock time as if that is an achievement. So we critique Black people negatively about this CP time. There are all these ways that we critique Black people about not being timely. But I think it is a misplaced criticism, because I think in places where Black folks were not timely, the irony is those same Black people swept your floors. Those same Black people scrub your drawers. Those same Black people wet nursed your children. I mean, and they taught their children to honor you.
So really, we had less time to begin with. We might go overtime in another arena.
Absolutely. And time moves. It's not exact. We think the clock is exact, but it's not really exact. And the time on Earth is not the time on Mars. So this is time in a particular space, in a particular place, in a little bitty place in the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
and so the way that you speak really breaks down information so that people can understand it and find a buy-in. But then there's the teachings of the church and the ideologies that if you go into a church and that you are 14 and pregnant and not married, of course, that you might be called up and you will be chastised. If you are gay, do it quietly.
right,
Or do not come.
right.
Or there's not a place. Or if you are not tithing, we don't want you. Like there's strictness out
It's
there
true.
that
It's true.
turns so many people away.
It is true.
And in reading your book, I am wondering how you overcame that to see the light.
I think two things. One, what you're saying is absolutely right. It's absolutely right. And I think the most radical thing the Black church could do is trade out the Bible.
Trade it out. So
Trade it out for another Bible, right? Or for other books that we understand to be holy. See, I think a person, if a person really understood who God is, do you know how many sermons are in the bluest eye?
Mm-hmm.
You know how many sermons are in James Baldwin?
True. Yes.
And you Baldwin loved God certainly as much as you do. So he gave us sermons. Our problem is that we've thought we need sermons in this sanctioned place, right? Called the Bible as we know it. Also, which I think I told y'all, I'm maybe 50 pages from completing a new Bible myself. I've written a whole new scripture, right? It's about the same length as the Bible as we know it. But it's what God said to me for the world, right?
So we cannot just lightly go over that you wrote a Bible.
The same length as...
the same length
Yes.
as a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Because I'm a writer.
Because you are a writer.
The ones who wrote that book, I guess they were writers too.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, I want to demystify it.
Right.
Because this book, God didn't write it. It didn't fall from the clouds.
Right.
Okay.
Some human beings wrote it.
So why trade out as opposed to supplement? Why trade out the Bible as opposed to
maybe supplement
adding the Bible?
I could roll with supplement.
Okay. Okay.
But the reason I said trade out, and again, I could roll with supplement because there are beautiful, beautiful parts of the King James Bible as we know it, right? But the thing I think is important for a people at some point is to make sure you're getting the word of God, um, that this particular people heard God through your own being and through your own voice. See, this text as we know it, right, was spoken to a particular people for a particular time. And I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. What I've been frustrated with is then why couldn't we as Black people, right, write the thing that God said to us? So I said, I'm a writer, so I should do it, right? It's been the hardest thing I've ever written, though, the most challenging, because I don't want to write what I like. I'm
Right.
really discerning what God would have me say. You know, I'm in the book of Leroy right now, and um, it's telling this story of this young brother named Leroy and the struggles and the difficulties he had until he finds his spirit and finds his spirit and finds his gifts. You know, he grows up in the hood, blah 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 blah. Right. Um,
So you're making it very contemporary, obviously.
mhm.
In addition, you were the only author.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I'm the only writer,
You're the only writer.
meaning I'm the one writing it. But many of these stories are borrowed from places sometimes.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
So how do you, so in the process of, you said you're writing not what you like, but you're writing what's being told to you.
Correct.
How do you make that differentiation?
It's not as hard as it would seem, because some of the stuff I want to write cusses some folk out. Right? Some of the stuff I want to write is stuff that would make me feel comfortable. I've not had that difficulty. The greater difficulty I've had is getting enough time to do it, right? Because I have to really be in a sacred space when I'm doing this, right? And the question for me is, always when I am in this project, what is God saying to a people, not what is God saying to me, right? And so I say, God, give me what you would have the people to know. And it's been just the most remarkable. There's a book of Black saviors. It's in the same form. I'm using the same form as the Bible, you know, chapter, verse,
Chapter,
all
verse.
of that. All of that.
Okay.
Book, chapter, verse, all of that. There's a book of Leroy. I said I'm in that. The prophets. There's the what is his name? There's a song of Shaniqua. There is
Now, some people will say, and I understand your point in that, listen, there were writers that were out there, they put something together the same way that you are, just in a different time and space.
Sure.
It all makes sense.
Sure.
You're going to have those people who are going to say, now that is blasphemous.
Sure.
What do you say to them?
That I've been expecting that, because most self-hating people are going to call anything blasphemous that comes from the self. See, part of the reason we embrace the Bible is because it comes from somebody else.
True.
And somebody whose materiality we admire and long for. Because really, how much sense does it make that anybody enslaved would take anything spiritual from the people who enslaved?
Right. That's the conundrum.
Yes.
That
And I'm trying to weave us out of it.
Yeah. So you're so again, going back to your the chapter in Black on Black, which is one of my favorite chapters.
Yes.
Because I'm fascinated by your relationship with the church in terms of growing up, and you know, the idea that God hates you, right? Like being taught that, and trying to find ways to conform.
Sure.
But you still have a deep relationship with the church.
Yes, I do, because I believe in the institution. I don't necessarily believe in its theology. Right. And those two things are clearly separated in my head. Right. It's like I can believe in Kroger and hate many of the foods they sell and know that it's bad for you. And I don't buy those foods, but I do buy some of the other ones. Right. Because the other option other than Kroger is Publix. And I can believe in Publix, but Publix sells some of that bad stuff too. Right. So every institution in America is problematic for me. See, the church is problematic, but public schools are too. Right. The laws are too. Right. And so when I look at American institutions, what I generally see is the governance of white supremacy in all of them, right? But what I'm very clear about again is we knew the Creator before we knew God. So I can absolutely walk with the Creator as and I'm helping my brothers and sisters to work out our conundrum with somebody else's God. Right? Because see, when I go outside and see the flowers bloom in springtime, I don't need a book to help me understand what's happening. Right? When I see you and get excited about just seeing my brother because you're so awesome and so wonderful, I don't know that there's any book in the Bible that is going to tell me the magnificence in my heart of what my brother represents. So you see, I'm doing the Creator and I'm doing creatorship, if you will, right, all day, all the time. When most folks go into the building, they're doing Godship, right? And some of that's not bad, you know. Even when I think about choirs, one of the things I love about the choir, I think the Black church choir has done a magnificent job of not falling prey to what the pulpit has fallen prey to. Like the choir and the preacher often do not say aligning things.
That is true.
Right? The preacher might condemn sexuality. There is no Black gospel song that's going to say sissies are going to hell. The music is not going to do it. Because the music comes from Black people's soul. The music was not a learned trait from a religion we met here.
Right.
We brought the tradition with us.
Right.
Right. In other words, the aesthetic of Black people is not going to condemn Black people. The learned theology might, though. So I hear it in the music.
Right. Because a call and response is something that you said it comes from within, from the soul, from the heart.
Absolutely.
It's not. It wasn't done and created to tear someone down. To beat them down because they didn't do something.
And there's no women can't speak in the church. They can lead songs in this choir.
You bet they can.
In fact, if you don't have them, you're not gonna have one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I'm saying that, and I saw these pockets as a child growing up, and I saw places where my soul was just elated. And then sometimes the sermon would be so bad, I just pull out a book and read, and do, you know. But I loved the music. I loved seeing my friends at church, right? And quite frankly, there were also other parts of the church that I think are magical and wonderful, and things like when we'd eat together. Maybe that food would be another level. It would just be magnificent because it was somebody brought fried chicken and Miss So-and-so's greens and Miss So-and-so's potato salad and So-and-so's pound
caramel cake.
Listen, it was like a feasting.
Right. With all the people who you knew and loved.
Absolutely.
And literally grew up with.
But see, we took it for granted. We just thought we just eating at the church.
Right.
Really, we were doing ritual. See, I couldn't explain it as a child, but now as an adult, having studied, African-American studies, I get it. Black people were doing ritual, and that's what I can't get enough of. I love when Black people do ritual. And what is ritual? When we come together and invite spirit to be a guest among us. That's when Black people say, let the Holy Ghost have its way. Right? There are all kinds of ways we say it, but what we're saying is, come on invisible and disturb whatever part of this you need to disturb in order for our souls to be made glad. That's what Black people are saying. And we do it all the time.
We do.
We do it all the time. And that I love. When people fall out, I love it. When people run, I love it. But I love it not so much because of the performance.
Yeah.
I love it because it is extra human.
Right. And so much freedom in the church, right?
Yes.
Listen, granted, some people might fall out at work, but generally no. But you can go to church, you can fall out.
Right. And people say, like, what happened to you, child? Spirit hit me.
That's right.
And for Black people, that's the answer. What does that mean? What exactly does that mean? That means actually you're coming to invisibility as a stranger. Because if you understand ritual, invisibility is what we do in ritual. Right? The unknown, the unseen, the unexpected. That's what we do in ritual. It's supposed to be common if you living in a Black community. Yeah. That's supposed to just be how we roll. That's just how we do things. And that's what I have loved about the Black church was the keeper of ritual. Right. And that's why I stay in it even now. Again, I would revise much of the philosophy, much of the theology. I would revise much of it, but I would not get rid of the Black church. I would
Mhm.
not. I would not vote to get rid of it.
Comrades, if you're enjoying this episode, join the conversation and make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Nah. I'm wondering if the Black church in 2025, the way that we look at it, needs other supplements. And I've seen them. For example, Black church is getting more into health awareness.
Sure.
Black church is getting more into, educational.
Sure.
In
Sure.
other words, it has grown in certain ways.
Absolutely.
Do you think it can do everything?
No. In fact, I think that's the error. I don't know that I think the Black church needs to do more. I think we need other institutions, though. We need other institutions in the Black community in general.
So like a mental health institute or a wellness center, care,
a trauma center,
Okay.
where you go to work through your trauma, right? A parenting center where parents go to learn the skill of parenting, right? A relationship institute where people go to learn the intricacies, right, of how you relate, how you move, etc. Part of the problem is we have historically tried to ask the church to be all of that.
Yeah.
And the church wasn't for that. And ritual even is not for that. Like a ritual, a meeting, a ceremony is not the same thing. If we need to figure out why my child is not doing well in school, you don't need a ritual. I need to meet you and let's talk this out.
Right.
We keep trying to take everything, right? My child's not doing well in school. Let me pray to Jesus. Wrong person. Jesus is not going to teach your child tomorrow. You need to go to that school.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think we've asked the church for too much. But I do think that, again, we need institutions. We need other institutions where for 40 years, this is all that institution has done. You know, we keep talking about trauma as Black people.
Right.
The irony is, where does a person go to work it out? Because if we're not careful, we just going to keep on announcing trauma.
Right.
We traumatize. Okay.
And never get solution oriented.
Agreed.
Now what do we do?
Agreed. Well, wow. And what folks say is, well, you know, I've been going to church. That's not for that, right? You'll get bits and pieces to help you along the way, right? But trauma is a particular kind of social reality that a person has to really discover the variables thereof and to work through, right? The point of church is to do a particular spiritual kind of thing, right? And so all of this simply to say, I'm begging, and I'm trying to raise up some young people who will start some trauma centers where folks can go for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and maybe years, and take their trauma, right, and walk through it and heal it. Because healing is different from medicine.
It is.
Right? Like you can have a doctor, but you still need a healer.
That's that real internal work. Let you get some water.
Right.
That's that real internal work that you have to do between the me, myself, and I of yourself to really get through.
Because the medicine doesn't get to the core of what's causing the symptoms. Like the medicine treats the symptoms, but not the actual what needs to be healed.
Because medicine is not supposed to do that. The job of medicine is exactly that. The job of a healer. The reason a healer doesn't give you pills, because the job of a healer is not to soften or seemingly assuage the symptoms of your issue. The job of a healer is to help you unpack the self so you can find why you planted that seed.
My makeup artist today, she talked about going to a singles ministry last night. Even in the rain, she said it was packed. Hundreds and hundreds of people. She said if it didn't rain, you wouldn't be able to find a seat. She said that, she was hoping that she would be able to find someone, but it's just making me think about how I'm not sure if that's the place to bring hundreds and hundreds of people with an expectation that, hey, maybe all of you might find someone in this particular gathering, especially when most of the people in the church, even these days, I don't care where you go, are women, So it just speaks to this whole idea of what you're saying in terms of you need other supplements.
Absolutely.
It can't all happen in the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that strains the church. Yeah.
Did they tithe? All those singles?
Well, I don't know if there was an offering last night. And that's a good question, though. But that is a good question. It was a panel discussion. They had interesting discussions about should you pay, 50-50, or if somebody is living with their parents, is that the person that you want to date? Just different topics that. But again, the goal was we have this relationship ministry and conference, and everybody hoped that they were going to meet someone, but clearly, I don't think that that's a good way to do it.
But see, also even things like tithing, I think could be a very, very good thing. If you're in a church where all of us are committed to it and we're committed to each other, the point of tithing is to set up a resource so that at any point when any of those of us who are in trouble, that resource takes care of you.
Yeah.
Right. So a tithe, I get it. Because if my house burns down, which is what might happen in the 40s and 50s, house burns down. This resource builds you another house without you going into debt to some other person.
Right.
That's what tithing really is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And when you're more vested, you actually want to see a better return.
Absolutely.
It makes you work harder.
Or you lose your job.
Too. Oh, absolutely.
And so for 6 weeks, you're out of work. The church would feed the family.
Sure. Yeah, the concept of tithing, I totally get and totally agree with, but nowadays we see where tithing money goes.
Yeah. I think it's problematic, and this is just my own position. I think it's problematic that a preacher's or a pastor's cultural state far exceeds that of the people the pastor is pastoring.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what's deep: most people in the congregation want it too. It's not just the pastor.
So specifically, you're saying
they want an elevated king.
Wow.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. I've seen this even on campus. Like I drive a little red a Toyota, right? 2018 Toyota. I drove to campus one day and students were standing outside and I parked my car and I got and they were like, Dr. Black, that's your car? I said, absolutely. Oh, no, Doc. No, Doc. I said, what's the problem? Come on, Doc, man. You one of our most illustrious, man. No, man, no. And it hit me, right? For the sake of the salvation of their imagination, of the worth of this school, they needed elevated folks, right? Whom seemingly they could boast about to the world. And I had to walk them through. Part of the problem, y'all, is that you've gotten sucked into the crime of white supremacy. Because the crime of white supremacy is that the look of the thing, right, represents its value. And I said, the reason I love this car is because it's paid for.
Amen.
It's cool. It's wonderful. But they weren't proud of that car. And they wanted something to be proud of. I say, what you got to be proud of, right, is the knowledge I transferred to you, right? And they got that. You got to be proud of that, right?
Now, here's another way to look at it, but you might have the same answer. And that is, okay, Dr. Black, I put him so high on this pedestal, and I want to be like Dr. Black. And my being like Dr. Black, I would also like a nice car. So the fact that he can attain a car that's, looks like a certain way, I also see myself getting that too.
Yes.
The aspiration is there. I see myself with you, but then I also see myself with that car.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you come up with the same answer.
And the first thing I come up with is, let's not do this pedestalization.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I want to see if we can end that. I want no pedestal. But I do want you to be proud of me. I do want you just to say, oh my God, I'd love to be like him. Marvelous. Be like me.
Right.
Be like me. Absolutely be like me. But in being like me, that's not an elevation. I want it to be a transformation. See, being like me is not driving a big car. Right? If you're trying to be like me, that's not going to do it.
Because that's not you.
That's not me.
It's not you.
Being like me is read these 3,000 books and then let's talk.
Right.
If you want to be like me, right? And I want you to want to be like me, because the worst thing in the world is a people whose heroes are unclear, right? A people got to be clear about your heroes, because the children got to be clear who we looking at, right? And who we following. The notion that we ain't following nobody, don't nobody want to be the elders, hey, listen, I just want to live my own life free. I don't want nobody critiquing me. What you will have is young people who are frustrated, lost, discontent. And then we tell them, listen, be better than me, as we've talked about before. Horrible statement. Horrible statement. I'm doing all this teaching that I'm going to tell my student to be better than me. It's ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
And what do you mean by that? Because we hear that all the time. I would like even parents to say to their children, I hope that you have more than me. I hope that
statement.
All right. So the translation of that is what? Because some of it is just what's going on in the world. Social status just change. I hope that my work will translate into something very well so that you don't have to.
It already has. That's the problem, right? If he looks at his daughter and says, don't be like me. What?
Well, no, the phrase is be better than me. You think it's the same thing?
It's the same thing. What in the world is she supposed to be then? What's better than you? What is it?
Well, I can get very specific. Maybe it's just me, but I do see how a parent could say.
I see how parents could say. I'm asking, literally, what's better than you?
Okay, I see
that your daughter is gonna be.
Right.
No, but I'm literally asking.
I'm thinking I don't know what else I would point to. I mean, be like.
Okay.
And why are we pointing to anything? See, that's really the problem. That's really the problem. Because if our children end up being us, it's when we should be proud.
I get it. I'm just trying to parse that for people who live in that be better than me zone. And you are parsing it.
I am parsing it. And it is self-hatred at its best.
Okay.
I mean, again, I always use these animal analogies. When a small gazelle is coming up, do the big gazelle say, leap further than me? No, leap like me.
Yeah.
Follow me.
But is there because it can also be looked at as I'm amazing.
Yes.
Be more amazing than me.
No.
Or it could also be looked at as I've been on drugs all my life. You got to be better than me.
It's not better than you.
Okay, so maybe it's just the phrasing.
It is the phrasing.
And I know that the words are very important. So that's
sure, if you had a parent who was on drugs, right? To look at the child and say, I don't want you to be on drugs, I think it's absolutely healthy.
Okay, I get it. I see what you're saying.
I think that's absolutely healthy. But I think that's the statement of be better than me is an invitation for our children to erase us.
Right. And assign a really low value to who you are.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And thus to who they are.
Right, because they come from there.
And then the other thing that's really dangerous is if they're not supposed to be us, because when we say be better than me, fine, then you're not my example.
Right.
Then who is?
I see what you're saying.
So if it's not you, because you want me to be better than you, okay, who's the one who's better than you that if I follow them, I do well? Who is that?
So in one way, it could be a challenge, right? Like this is the bar, and I know we're saying the same thing, but I'm trying to go at it another way. This is the bar that I've set. I challenge you to raise that bar.
But see, that's a problem. I don't challenge you to raise that bar. I challenge you to establish the bar of your own excellence, not in comparison to me.
Okay, I buy that.
Yeah,
which is why I say don't name your son a junior. Now that I understand. I mean, I don't know if you have any philosophy on that, but I understand that because that literally is you've got my first, you've got my last name, you're just a second or third or fourth, and you're going to have that name. So out in the world, we might even get mixed up in the Social Security system or when it comes to our credit. And I think that that's too much to live up to, especially if someone doesn't see themselves. It's too much of trying to figure out who you are when you are named.
It's really perfect patriarchy to me.
Yes.
It's the reason women don't do it.
Exactly. Yeah, I could.
It's male ego, really.
Yeah, I understand that.
We want to remake ourselves. But
yeah. Are there ways that the Black church hurts the Black community?
I think I think there are ways that the Black church has cost the Black community. Yes, and I think some things in terms of poor self-worth, sometimes poor self-hatred. I think so. I think so. I think so. Even things like the way Black people beg to get into heaven,
Mm.
I think is absolutely demeaning and self-degrading. Person who loved God their whole lives, tried to do well, prayed their whole lives. Of here's this Black woman, 80 years old, and she's hoping to get into heaven. I think that's absolutely demeaning and degrading.
Mm.
I think that's just one way, right? So yes, but I think that's going to be true of every institution. I think every institution is going to be costly to a community, but it can also save it because for that reason, we could talk about schools. Have public schools been costly to the Black community? Absolutely,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
But there is some good and value.
But we gonna send our kids to them for the most part, right? Folks, some people do private schools, but not the majority of Black kids. Majority of Black kids are in public schools, and I get it, and I understand why. Um, so the real thing is whose institution is it and who's running it, and until we get clear that the problem is not the institution, but to whom it belongs, we'll just keep trying to, save the kid from the bathwater, as they say. So yeah, I do think that the Black church has been problematic for the Black community in some ways, but I think it also saved the Black community too. It's the paradox, right?
We have so many churches who have the best real estate in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a wonderful lesson too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like McDonald's is really about real estate.
Mhm.
Churches are wonderful in terms of what they have amassed in that way. But I'm also wondering, with so many churches, what do you think brought on the mega church and some of the philosophies that I think are somewhat different than all those churches that we are
I
experiencing?
think integration.
The mega church.
I think so. I think the birth of it was integration. It's evolved over time, right? But I think the birth of it was integration because it's really one simple thing. And integration simply said, you are not, quote unquote, very heavy quotes, limited to your own community anymore.
Mhm.
Whether that's where you shop,
Mhm.
where you go to school, that also includes where you go to church.
Sure.
Right. And so we started driving across town and we started going to church that we preferred, or where there's a pastor we preferred, or whatever. It's the same thing with schools. There are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of folks just move so that my kids can go to the school here, not improve that school, but
Right.
move. So you see, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So you have 3,000 people, in this area, but they drove all the way from all over here to get there.
And left their
Right.
communities.
Yes. And so when they go home, right, if they get in trouble, it's going to take them 45 minutes, right, to get to this place. Back before, you could practically walk to your church, right? And it was smaller. It absolutely was. And it's true that sometimes your choir was 7 people, right, instead of 70, right? All of that's true. But what's also true is the ways in which it is costly, because 85% of the people who go to this mega church don't know each other, don't know the pastor. That man is not your pastor. He's the preacher here. He doesn't know your name. How you gonna pastor me and you don't even know my name? That's not my pastor. He is the overseer of this building. That's true, but that could not possibly be your pastor. In fact, in most mega churches, they have a board of pastors, right?
They do.
Who they divide people up to who speak to these people, not that one.
That's true. And it'll take you have to
a
make
year.
an appointment to
Listen.
even sit down, as opposed to, I know when we grew up, the pastor would be there at the end of church
You can talk to him right there.
walk right
Absolutely.
there. Right there.
Well, when I hear the term, listen to the message and not the messenger. But sometimes you need the messenger to really understand the message. So if
sure.
so say you're in a church in your neighborhood, in your community, but the messenger is not one that vibes with you.
Sure,
right?
sure. And back in the day before segregation, what Black people do is vote that man out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially Black Baptist churches. They choose a pastor and they get rid of him.
So I had a personal experience that that really wrecked me for for a lot of years, and I was never, you know, big on church. I had an aunt in Chicago, Pentecostal. She went to church every night, Tuesday through
Sure,
Sundays, and
sure.
3 times on
Oh,
Sunday.
absolutely.
You know, my mother, uh, you know, we would when we would go to church, we go to the Church of Religious Science. So Reverend Daniel, who predated Michael Beckwith, um, and so I was never really huge on church. And then I found a church. I had gone with a friend of mine, and you know, whatever the sermon was, I was moved. I must have been like 12. And I was so moved, you know, when they called people down to the front of the church, I came to the front of the church. I was in tears the whole night because
Oh, wow.
I finally found the messenger that really moved me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then come to find out, he was married and everything, but then to come to find out he was sleeping with my friend's mother. And it just like I couldn't go back to that church.
Mm.
So I think about and it really because I was so moved by that pastor, and then to see you know what his life really was, and having a personal experience, it just it soured me.
You know, I want to say one thing to that. One of the things that I think the church is missing that African people had in African communities, in our spiritual spaces, that did not translate into European church structures, thus, many Black churches are missing it too. And that is the correction of the pastor
Mm.
as part of the process. See, he's got to be or she's got to be redeemable too. See,
Mm.
the fact that that pastor spoke in a way and spoke to your heart makes sense to me, which means he had a gift. Him being wrong and sleeping with us is absolutely out of order, but it doesn't erase the gift. He still got the gift. When Whitney Houston was struggling with drugs, nobody was unclear that the woman could sing. We were still clear about that. In fact, we were wondering, man, why would you do that to yourself? Blah, blah, blah. Right. But we weren't, and it didn't make her a non-singer. You see what I'm saying? And part of the process that's part of African village life that I think is so profound is the process of correction is applied to every soul here. So what should have happened is a community of folks pull this pastor and say, Pastor, are you clear you out of order, brother? And are you clear you can't do that and be here? But your gift transforms lives. Now, if you're going to walk in submission and correct yourself and commit to a better life, and we're going to hold you accountable to it, right? Let's roll together so we get the gift without the mess. But what we have to do as Black folks is the minute we find a sizable enough flaw in a leader, I'm done. But who is the leader without flaw? See, this is what keeps messing us up. Folks are afraid that in the recent release of the King Papers, oh, is it going to prove something that's going to show that, listen, see, here we are again. Here we are again, which means subconsciously, we keep trying to figure out, why can't we get some leadership that is extraordinary enough, right, that none of its flaws would disturb me? That's why it's never true. And that's why parents tend not to tell children things too, because we fear that our children won't honor us if they know our fullest truth. But the real thing is we have got to learn to do correction on every level of every institution in our community. Then we can keep good folks. I don't care if you sweeping the floor or if you're pastoring church. See, the janitor, if he has a wife and a girlfriend, he out of order too. And somebody's supposed to stop and say, Mr. Janitor, put the broom down a minute. Bro, what are you doing? See, if that doesn't happen, but we do it to the pastor, right, then the whole church is out of order.
My takeaway that I get from you is that don't leave, right? Which is the message that you were talking about earlier. You can't just leave a relationship, a church,
it's accountability as a principle.
Right. You stay, you can correct it.
Absolutely. And you go to pastor and say, Pastor, brother, we cannot do this. You can't live like this. And we find this honorable and we just keep on following you. I'm clear about who you are and I'm clear about your gift. That's the thing too. See, that's still true. It's still true. Even if Martin Luther King did have an extramarital affair, he would be out of order. It'd be wrong and it's disrespectful. And it's dishonorable to correct it. That's true all day long. And that does not mean the man was not a magical orator. It would still be true.
Sure.
But can't we keep one and correct the other? If not, people keep hiding and lying because people can't figure out how to be perfect long enough.
Mhm.